Yes, I'm just curious about your first interaction with Maharaj and how you felt at the time, what happened in that interaction, and how you knew that he would be your guru.
Okay. My first conscious interaction, if you could call it that, with him, with Maharaj-ji, was when I met Ram Dass. And he had come back from India, and he was living at his father's place in New Hampshire. And I heard about him from some friends of mine. So I went up to see him. And well, okay. But the minute I walked into the room where he was sitting on the floor on the other side of the room, leaning back against the wall, and his eyes closed. So the minute I walked into that room, I knew that whatever it was I was looking for was real. And it was in the world. And you could find it. And that was the beginning of the rest of my life. From that moment on, I didn't know what it was or how to find it, but I just knew, I had read all the books, all 3 of the books. We're talking about, the 1500s here, a long time ago. There was just a few books around: Autobiography of a Yogi, Gospel of Ramakrishna, Zen and Japanese Culture, a couple of books. But this was real. This came from inside me, or from somewhere. And from that moment on, I was aware of this presence whenever I looked, when I wasn't busy doing other things. And then I spent about 2 years with Ram Dass, hanging around in the States. And then I went to India to meet Maharaj-ji. Now, I had been feeling, all we had was these little pictures, little black and white pictures of him. And but the minute but I had been feeling him everywhere. It was like the air. So when I first walked into the room with him, it was very confusing because I couldn't figure out how all this got into that little body wrapped up in that blanket. How did that happen? How is it? It was, my mind kind of went like, ah. But he just, that was, we had been, me, Rameshwaras and Danny Goleman, we had gone to India together through London. In those days, you found these really cheap flights, bounced over. And, so we were in London for a few days, and we met Swami Muktananda there. And he said, well, you're getting into Mumbai. Why don't you go out to my ashram for a week and chill out before you go see your guru? We said, okay. So we went to Ganesh Puri for about a week. And I had a funny experience there. So I was reading a book called Ramakrishna and His Disciples, which is a beautiful book. And I don't know if you know the story about Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. The first time I think Vivekananda came to see Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna put his foot on Vivekananda's leg, and Vivekananda started to go out, and he freaked. So Ramakrishna took his foot off and said, okay, not now. So they gave us this little hut to live in up on the hill. There was nothing there. Now it's like a city. So I was lying in bed and I was reading this book and I was reading that story. And just as I read that Ramakrishna puts his foot on Vivekananda, I started to go out and the book dropped from my hand. And before I tell you that. So when we were in London, we walked into the room where Swami Muktananda was, and he immediately turned to us and he said, "These boys aren't English." "Come here." So he had us sit in front of him and he said, "Come tomorrow morning and meditate with me." Like at 4 a.m. So we didn't have any money. It taken us like 3 hours to walk to this place. So at around 10 o'clock, we walked back. We laid down for about 10 minutes, and we got up and walked back. We got there about 4 a.m, or maybe it was 6 a.m, and we were ushered upstairs to his room. And he was sitting on the bed, naked except for a langoti, covered in ash, right? And I went, whoa. And he said, "Sit down." So we sat in front of him, and he gave us a mantra, and he went to each one of us. So he went in front of me, he put his fingers in my eyes, in my eyeballs, and I thought he was going to pop my eyeballs out. He just went, like this. And then he banged me on the top of the head. And then he sat down again, and don't worry, nothing happened. Until now I'm in that little hut on the hill at his ashram, and I'm reading this book at this point where Ramakrishna is about to put Vivekananda in samadhi, and the book falls from my hands, and I go out, my eyes go up where he pushed them, and then right where he banged me on the top of the head, I went out through the top of my head, and I'm shooting up through space, and I'm looking at the stars, and this is amazing, and I go, wow, this is great, and I'm flying up, it's fantastic, and I thought, did I just take acid? So then a few days later we went up north, and eventually we found Maharaj-ji at Kenchi temple. So we came in and we bowed down, and Danny had a picture of Nityananda, who was Muktananda's guru. Maharaj-ji says, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, he's a good sadhu." That means he's God on earth. Maharaj-ji knew everything about everybody. If he said he's a good sadhu. So then we put our apples down, and he threw them to the other people in the room. And I went, "You didn't take our apples." And he looked at me and said, "What did I do? Did I do right?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Did I do right? What did I do? Did I right?" I said, "Anything you do is right." "Yeah." "What did I do?" "I don't know." He said, "The prasad comes from God and it goes to God." And then he said, I forget exactly how it happened right now, but then he said, something like, "If you want it, don't take it." I'm working on that. It's only been 55 years or so. And he said, when you have God, because I was wondering, he didn't really accept the apples, I thought, right? He said, when you have God, you don't need anything. And I just looked like, huh? And he said, when you have God, you have no desires. I went, oh. And then he had us fed, and yeah. But it was really a shift, because what happened was I wound up getting very attached to the body, and which caused me a lot of suffering later. But in the meantime, it was pretty good. But yeah, it was that somehow it must have been necessary to go through that. But that feeling of when I walked into the room where Ram Dass was sitting, that never changed. That's exactly what it is even right now. That's his presence. For me, that's what I call it. Other people call it other things. And that presence is always here when I remember to look. I mean, it's still here when I'm not looking. And then he said, come back in like a week. A week? You know, so we went back to the town and hung around for a while, and then we came back. We started, in that first few months, he would just say, come back in 3 days, come back in 4 days. He didn't let us hang out too much at that time. We had heard all the stories about him from Ram Dass for years, you know. And the feeling was, of course, like I said, it wasn't something new. It was something that we knew from whenever. It was familiar, it was home. He said to KK was there. KK was one of his old disciples, a friend of Ram Dass. He said, these are good boys, and they come from good families. We looked at each other like, what? I don't know Maharaj-ji's qualifications for good family, but it must be something good. And then he disappeared. Jesus. He always calls me at the wrong moment. Then he disappeared, and so we thought, okay, why don't we go meditate? So we went to Bodh Gaya. And we took these Buddhist meditation courses, like 10-day courses. I don't know, we did like maybe 4 or 5 in a row. And then Ram Dass showed up, and he hadn't seen Maharaj-ji since he came back the second time. So at one point we decided, okay, enough of this Buddhist stuff, let's go find Maharaj-ji. And that's the story about the bus. You know the story about the bus? No? So one day this beautiful brand new Mercedes bus shows up in Bodh Gaya. I mean, this little village. Later we found out the guy was a hash smuggler, and the bus was full of hash. We didn't know that. But anyhow, so he was heading back to Delhi. So we decided, okay, we'll go back to Delhi. We'll ask around some of the old devotees that we knew, and we'll try to find Maharaj-ji. So let's say there were 15 of us, 16 of us who got on the bus. And Sharon Salzberg was there, but she stayed. She's been meditating all these years while I've been watching TV. So we get on the bus, and then we had this very intense argument. Some of us wanted to stop at the Mela in Allahabad. There was every year, Kumbh Mela. Every year there's a Mela. Every 12 years it's a Kumbh Mela. So, but this was one of those years when it was just a regular Mela and there's only maybe 10 million people there. But Ramdas wanted to get to Delhi, and he was kind of the boss, But we were having, an argument, and he was saying, "Oh, we're going to Delhi. We're not stopping. We got to get there by tonight." No, we want to go. We're passing right by the place. You can't believe you're not going to go there. It was very intense. Finally, it was agreed upon that we would go, we would see the place, then we get back on the bus, and we get to Delhi by that night. Okay. So, see, Danny had gone there. He had escaped from one of the meditation courses and gone there for a few days. And then he'd come back and told us about it. So we got on the bus, and the bus pulls up to this area by the river, which maybe a few days before there were 10 million people. There was nobody. Not one human being was there. It was empty. There was a dog walking across the field. I can remember that. So we went, oh, all right, well, let's head back to Delhi. So the bus started to make a long turn in this field. And then Danny said, there's a Hanuman temple in the corner of this field, at the edge of the field. Why don't we go see Hanuman? And then we'll go to Delhi. Okay, we'll go see Hanuman. So the bus makes this long turn right around the edge of the field, heading towards the Hanuman temple. And then walking the other way, in the opposite direction that the bus was going, was Maharaj-ji. He was walking with somebody, and that person later told us, as the bus just about came up to him, he said, "They've come." So only one of us saw him, Rameshwar saw him, otherwise we would have gone right by him. And we all jumped, we ran out of the bus, everybody's crying, laughing, hysterical. And then Maharaj-ji says, "Okay, follow us." And he gets in a rickshaw with this guy whose name was Dada. And he asked this big, huge Mercedes bus is following this little cycle rickshaw through the streets at about 2 miles an hour. The rickshaw pulls up to a house. Maharaj-ji and Dada go in. The bus stops. We kind of get out. Now what? And a lady comes out of the house and says, come in, have your meal. And we said, "Our meal?" "Yes, this morning Maharaj-ji told us to prepare food for 17 people, that you'd be coming." That's 16 of us and the driver. So, who decided in that big argument about whether we should stop or go or straight or not stop? Who decided that? We thought we were deciding, but obviously that's not the case, is it? See, those things are always happening. And you kind of got used to it, and you kind of relaxed into that space where you had no secrets. He knew everything. And he still wasn't kicking you out. It was very hard to understand. When he took the keys away from Ramdas to the Volkswagen bus and gave them to me, I kept them with me. They were never more than like 2 inches away from me, because I wanted to drive Maharaj-ji in the car. But I never said anything. I was ready. So about 9 months went by, and we were in Allahabad, and I'm sitting there. Maharaj-ji just turns and says, "Got the keys?" "Huh? Chalo, let's go." "Yeah." So we walked out to the Volkswagen bus. The Maharaj was very short. So Dada was walking with him, and he opened the door, and they opened the door, and he had to throw himself up onto the seat, And as he did that, he bashed his head on the door, the edge of the car. I mean, really hard. I almost shat my pants. I said, Dada, did you see that? And Dada said, he did it on purpose. Just get in the car and drive. That is a real devotee. He did it on purpose. For Dada, anything Maharaj-ji did was on purpose. He knew what he was doing every second. So then I get in the car, and I start driving, and Maharaj goes, watch out, you're going too fast, watch out, there's people over there, be careful. The whole way to the Sangam, like about 20 minutes. Yeah, people coming. And I'm like, driving. We get to the Sangam, I stop the car, turn it off. We're there for like a minute. He said, okay, let's go back. And the whole way back, same thing, watch out, there's coming up, people coming in the store, you're going too fast. So we get back to the house, okay. A few days later, see, Ramdas had come back to India the second time after traveling around the world with Muktananda. He had met Muktananda in America, and then Muktananda asked him to show him around, and then they wound up going to Australia and then to India. So he had asked Ramdas to come do a pilgrimage with him in that winter, and Ramdas had agreed. So time came to go, and Ramdas said to Maharaj-ji, do I have to go? Maharaj said, you said you would go, you have to go. So we were sent with him. So I'm driving out of Allahabad, and there's this long turn somewhere, and on one side of the road, the other side of the road, there's a reservoir. And I'm driving, and I'm going too fast. And the bus starts to slide across the road, and the reservoir is right there. We were going right into the water when a huge wind came, like whoosh, and literally the car went about 10 feet back on the right side of the road. And I thought, that's why he banged his head. He did that. It's really difficult for us to wrap our heads around the fact that there are beings that live only to help us. They have nothing more to gain for themselves. They've done it, been there, done that. And they're only here for us. And everything they do is motivated only by one thing: love and compassion and kindness. That's three things, which are one thing. It's really hard because we live in a world where it's an eye for an eye every day. Anybody? Yeah.
You told us the story of the name of the driver, but what is the story behind Krishna Das' name? Who picked the name for you?
One day, I'd been driver for about 9 months or a year or something like that. And I said, all right, that's it, I guess. I'm driver. I wrote it in my diary that night. Next day we go to the temple. I get called into Maharaj-ji's room. He looks at me and said, Arjun, nay, Krishna, nay, Krishna Das. I said, Krishna Das? I'm a Hanuman guy. He just laughed. He said, don't worry, Hanuman served Krishna too. And that's the whole thing. And the story about that is a beautiful story in the Mahabharata, the big war. Krishna is Arjun's charioteer. And every day of the when the fighting was over, Krishna would get down and help Arjun off the chariot because he's the charioteer, that's what he does. the last day of the war, after it was over, Krishna says to Arjuna, okay, every day I've been helping you off the chariot, but today you jump off now and run as fast as you can away from the chariot. So Arjuna does. Krishna steps off the chariot. There was a white flag. All the chariots had a flag, right? There was a white flag with a red monkey on it. The minute Krishna stepped off the chariot, the monkey flew out of the flag and the chariot exploded in 1,000,000 pieces. And Krishna says to Arjuna, he said, Hanuman has been absorbing all the missiles that have been thrown at you. Didn't you notice that in the whole war you never had to change your chariot, where everybody else almost every day had to get a new chariot? In those days they fought with atomic weapons, really, because of the power of the mind. They would shoot an arrow, but they would put a mantra on the arrow. And the one with the most concentration had the most powerful weapon. When two of the same mantras met, the one who had the most concentration and the purest intention, that was the most powerful one. And there's a story about Arjuna, who was the second greatest archer. He's usually called the greatest, but actually his older brother, who was unknown to them at the time, was greater. But they were all with their guru. Their Dronacharya was their weapons guru. And all the archers were lined up. And Dronacharya asks one guy, he said, what do you see? And the guy says, I see a tree. The next guy, what do you see? I see a tree with a bird on a branch. Next guy, what do you see? I see the branch and the bird. Next guy, I see the bird. Next guy, I see the feathers of a bird. And finally he gets to Arjuna. He says, what do you see? I see a black spot, which was the eye of the bird, which is why Arjuna was the greatest archer. He was beyond conceptual thinking, and he saw a spot. He didn't see the eye of a bird. The target was a spot, and that's what made him the greatest, the second greatest.